Hi Titans, how we doing today? Hopefully you guys are doing fabulous. Hopefully you will appreciate today's video. I think I said today, or that was kind of like a case video, today's video all wrapped into one there. I hope you'll appreciate today's video though, and you'll consider subscribing to the channel. And hopefully you'll like the video by the end and you'll consider hitting that thumbs up for me as well. It really does help the channel grow and get out into the algorithm. So I wanted to show you a couple of videos today, and I didn't have them up because I was not doing good. I was like, uh-oh. But basically, I wanted to show you a couple videos on Bryan, of course, Bryan Kohberger, and how he got terminated from his teaching job. So Ashley Banfield and Bryan Entin are going to go over how Bryan was fired from his teaching job before the murders. He was fired for behavioral problems. He was told time and time again that he needed to get his behavior in check. They said that he was rude. He would grade the women differently than the men, being extremely sexist and biased, towards the women. And she'll actually go over a timeline on how he was fired. And then I'm going to show you, like 3 little videos here. And in the third video, you're going to hear from Scott Bond, an author and serial killer expert. He weighs in on what he believes could have led suspect Bryan Kohberger to do what he did. So without further ado, let me go ahead and play you the first tape here.
I think it's important because in the Idaho murder case, there's been a lot of focus on the chief defendant in the case, Bryan Kohberger. And now we are learning a few things were happening in that man's life leading up to and right after the murders. Things like being investigated by his own school, Washington State University, where he was working as a teaching assistant. And apparently the investigation wasn't going well. He was warned time after time after time to cut back on the bad behavior. We're told behavioral problems specifically. But time after time after time, he didn't. He got more feisty and belligerent, even arguing with his professors, until they finally decided, you're fired. That's right. Bryan Kohberger was fired as a teaching assistant from Washington State University. I have the actual specifics of this, and I wanted to sort of go through what we have come to learn was the sort of timeline of his warnings and all of the things that were listed on a termination letter that Kohberger himself was given right before they cut the cord with him. So I'm going to just watch some of these so I don't get them wrong. But the highlights, or lowlights, I guess you might call them, was that he had a sexist attitude towards females that he interacted with at the school, that he was rude to the women, and then get this, as a teaching assistant, he apparently graded the women differently than he graded the men. Here is the alleged language that was included in his termination letter along with the timeline, starting on September 23rd. And by our math, that's about 1 month into his brand new job as a teaching assistant in his doctoral program, which may or may not have been tied to his teaching job. September 23rd, Kohberger apparently has an altercation with one of the professors named Dr. Snyder. Just 10 days later, on October 3rd, the letter outlines that they had met to, quote, discuss the norms of professional behavior. And then 18 days after that, on October the 21st, Dr. Snyder emails Bryan Kohberger to say that he has, quote, failed to meet the expectations that were outlined in the discussions they'd had before. 12 days after that, on November the 2nd, they met again to discuss what they called an improvement plan.
I just want to point out here that I feel like at this point he knew he was going to be losing his job. They didn't need to tell him. I think that at this point he knew.
And then on December the 7th, that's about Well, let's cut to actually 12 days later. Well, it's 11 days later, the murders actually happened. So they have the meeting to discuss the improvement plan. And 11 days later, on November 13th, the murders are carried out. Then cut forward to 24 days beyond, and that's December 7th. That's when there was another meeting with the professors. And this was supposed to be about the progress of the, quote, improvement plan. Apparently, it didn't go too well because 2 days later, on December 9th, he had another altercation with Dr. Snyder. And here's the quote, in which it became apparent that you had not made progress regarding professionalism. 10 days after that, December 19th, Bryan Kohberger is officially terminated by Washington State University. And some are reporting that he was withdrawn from the data system 3 days later on December the 22nd. Thank you for watching.
Drop your comments below on what you guys think about that. And the whole thing about, him losing his teaching position. If you think, in fact, he did, just take this with a grain of salt. This isn't coming from his school that I know of, but I'm going to show you the next video on how Bryan Entin, he comes in on this interview here, and he will talk about how he was rude to students and how maybe he was caught by the teachers. Maybe he was grading the papers and the teachers were looking at them to make sure that, or putting the grades in, or just overlooking to make sure that they are putting right. And then maybe the professors actually, picked up on him grading the women or girl students a little bit harder, or a lot harder than the males.
I can tell you that we have 3 different sources where we have put that information together. We reached out to Washington State University. They won't comment on it. It is incredibly quiet and tight-lipped at Washington State University, not just in the administrative side, but also among the students. And that's why I want to bring in our Brian Entin, who's our senior national correspondent at NewsNation. All of this is quite surprising. Here we are months after the murders, Brian, and this information is coming out, and it is very, very hard to get official acknowledgement of this from Washington State University.
It is, Ashley, and this is very interesting what you have uncovered, because I'm thinking back to when I was in the building there where you just saw the video where Bryan Kohberger was teaching, was also a student, PhD student, criminal justice there at Washington State University. And the first thing I noticed when I was wandering around all of the hallways on multiple floors is on the bulletin boards, they had all of the teacher assistants, the TAs, and the professors listed in many different places, and his name didn't appear anywhere. I initially thought, okay, they went through after the arrest and they got his name off of everything in this building. But now I'm wondering, with this new information you're reporting, did they take his name down much earlier because he was in fact fired?
Well, it's pretty fascinating, because if you think about the dates, December 22nd, if he's withdrawn from the data system in that university, he still hasn't been arrested until December 30th, that Friday night. And we are also told that it was official. His official termination actually happened at the very end of that month. He was told, you're finished. You're not going to be a TA in the spring session. I'm not sure about the winter session, but the word has it that it was the 30th, that it was completely over, and that just, that ends up being the same day that he was arrested. What I'm curious about is why the students are so quiet about this. I understand the staff. They work for WSU. They have to toe the line if WSU doesn't want them speaking, but students don't work for the school. They can talk if they want to, and yet they haven't.
They've talked a little bit, Ashley. They don't want to go on camera when we've been on campus in the past, but they have spoken a little. From what we've gathered, he was a TA of both Criminal Justice 101 and criminal law. We heard from several students along the way that he gave off weird vibes, that they got a creepy feeling from him. We also heard something that matched up with your new reporting tonight, that he was a hard grader. That at one point, actually, there was such an issue with the way that he was grading papers that a higher level professor had to come in and get involved at one point.
So I do have something to say about that. It seems like the students all recognized him for being weird, being different, being out there. But he was a TA in 2 different classes. Why didn't these professors see that before they allowed him to be a TA?
Bryan, I remember when that original reporting broke, but I never remember anyone delineating between the grading being tougher on the women than on the men, just that he was very hard on the students. But not only are we hearing that he was grading women differently, but also that he was rude to women and that he, quote, had a sexist attitude towards women among his multiple behavioral problems.
Yeah, that is new. I haven't heard it to that extent. We did hear a little bit about possibly some sexism. We also heard, if you don't remember, Ashley, about there was an issue. We maybe had an issue with like a pride flag on a door in one of the school buildings there. But in terms of it going to the level with your new reporting tonight, to the point where he was actually fired, and there were so many issues that he was actually fired as a TA, that's brand new.
So, Bryan, I'm just looking over this timeline again, and it's pretty astounding because he only started as a TA at the end of August. But the problem started right away on September 23rd. Look at this timeline. There are just mere sometimes days and short weeks in between each issue. But the very first thing started within a month, a fight with his professor, and then letters saying, you've got to be, up on your professional behavior. You're not meeting the expectations. We need an improvement plan. We got to meet about the improvement plan. And another fight, like 2 fights with the professor, all in the course of a couple of months, all the while hearing, like, not in this timeline, but hearing these reports of being sexist and rude to women and being troublesome in the grading department. So what's curious is if Kohberger's program was tied to his teaching job. And not only that, he had an on-campus office and he had an on-campus apartment. And it's possible that those things were tied to his teaching job as well. So is it possible, Bryan, that his whole life was about to collapse because he was being, he was fired, but he knew that was coming, or at least he should have known it might have been coming. And he might have lost his program and his accommodations on campus.
It's a very big possibility. Let's go back and think to the fact that his dad came out to drive with him back to Pennsylvania. A lot of people questioned that. Why would the dad fly all the way over there to drive the car all the way back just for a Christmas break? Why wouldn't he just fly back? Would it even maybe be cheaper? Was there more going on behind the scenes now that we know all of this?
Thank you for watching. Go to NewsNation.
I feel like that Bryan Kohberger maybe was losing everything when he lost his job. Maybe he would lose his on-campus housing. Maybe he would definitely lose his office. So I think that could have been where he was saying maybe he was just going to drop out of school and go back home. Or maybe that's what his father thought. Maybe he needed a semester off. Or maybe he was going to quit school. Either way, maybe that's why his dad was like, yeah, I'm going to go and fly out and drive back with him to make sure he's okay, because he's having a lot of problems in school right now. If his family even knew about his troubles in school. This is the serial killer expert that I told you guys about, Scott Bond. He's an author and serial killer expert. He's going to weigh in on why he believes what led Bryan Kohberger to commit the crimes that he committed. And also, don't forget to put your comments down below. I love to hear them, and I do look through all of them. Also, if you could like the video and subscribe, that would be fantastic. I really appreciate you guys watching my video today.
And he's a criminologist, a professor. He's the author of the best-selling book, Why We Love Serial Killers, The Curious Appeal of the World's Most Savage Murderers. Dr. Bond, you probably just heard the breaking news that we just reported on all of these conflagrations that Bryan Kohberger seemed to have been having with his professors, with his students, and with other people among the staff, to the point where he was cut loose. He was fired from Washington State University from his teaching job. I just wanted to get your initial reactions to sort of that behavioral profile as you look at then now what he's accused of.
Oh, absolutely. And first of all, thank you for having me on this evening. And I wanted to say, I was thinking about this myself. I was a TA. When I was getting my PhD at the University of Miami, I was a TA, and that TA position was tied to my funding, my assistantship that paid for my entire education. So that is not something you want to lose. You do not want to risk losing something like that. And the fact that it escalated so quickly and that he was terminated in his first semester there would suggest to me that his behavior really was egregious, that it was something that had become a big problem for the department and the university. And so I wanted to just give that as a little bit of background. But to the extent that that this letter, which I don't believe the letter has been completely authenticated yet, but if it is in fact true and the timeline is true, then this is something that could have absolutely contributed to him reaching a tipping point in his rage and anger and leading him to strike out in this terrible murder situation.
Yeah, we don't have our hands on the letter yet, but we've had the essence of it authenticated by a source close to the investigation. And that's the next best thing without actually getting your hands on a copy of the termination letter. And obviously, you know, when it comes to those kinds of, you know, staff and policy, you know, obviously administrative staff policies, employment records are pretty private. It's hard to get your hands on those things. But I'm curious about, yeah, you know, I was so curious when you said that for you, the teaching assistant job was tied to the actual program. And I'm guessing that that's not a far stretch to suggest the accommodations that were on campus as well might have been part of that too. So there could have been a lot of stress. What I can't understand is the utter bravado that it would take if all of that was on the line and you're getting warning after warning and a helping hand to try to work through your problems. What kind of personality do you think this is that would literally thumb his nose at the authority that hold his future in their hands?
Great question. And you know, this crime that he committed is actually a mass murder. But I've been saying for some time now that the more that we learn about him, his development and his progression seems more similar to a serial killer. And I've studied serial killers extensively for some time. And so this didn't just happen, Ashley. I think that he was evolving, developing over a period of time. And he reached a tipping point where he simply couldn't take it anymore. And he had to act out on his fantasy of killing. And so something like this, where the rug has been pulled out from under him, his funding, his home, as you said, which I do believe was probably tied to his assistantship and his TA position, it could have just pushed him over the edge to the point that he had to act out. And because the escalation was already there. As you said, he was in trouble by September, by October. The murders took place in November, but he already knew that he was in deep trouble by then.
Well, he still has the presumption of innocence, and these are allegations against him until they're proven in a court of law. So at this point, he is an accused quadruple murderer. I'm still just so astounded by the sexism and the allegations that he was grading the women differently than the men, and that to me would be a big, you know, red flag for those teachers, or should have been, and perhaps they did catch it very quickly as they started right in September. Can't thank you enough. So it's just so enlightening, Dr. Bond. Thank you. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Have a good evening.
Like I said, I wonder if maybe the teachers picked up on that, and that's what caused people to look more in depth. Also, do you guys think that, you know, with his father just coming back to drive him, maybe he was quitting school? I don't know. Maybe he was. So let me know what you guys think about these videos in the comments below. I did want to break these up for you guys since sometimes you guys can't all come for the live. But I am going to be putting out a lot of pre-recorded videos, so just make sure all of your notifications are turned on. You're subscribed to the channel if you'd like to watch the new videos. And I really appreciate you guys spending a little bit of your time with me today. Thank you so much, and I will see you guys all in the next video. Bye, guys. you.